taking the time to visit with us today. My question will focus specifically on NATO and our obligations under Article 5 and the impact that we could see should we have to respond. Assuming the possibility exists that a belligerent Putin attack or at least his interest in perhaps expanding out of Ukraine and into one of our other allied countries that are part of NATO, what would be the probability, in your estimation, that we would also find ourselves not only legally obligated to respond in that area, but just very briefly, what do you believe the probability is of us having to also respond in short order to another conflict area regarding China? Just a probability, and I'm just going to go right in the line. Dr. Lin.
Thank you. So I think the probability of a large-scale two simultaneous large-scale conflicts are relatively low right now, mainly because we're not seeing clear signs yet that China coordinates its plans for Taiwan on what Russia is doing in Ukraine. Because if we did see that, we would have seen significant more use of force by China against Taiwan in the past year or so.
Thank you. Dr. Hill?
And I think in addition to what Dr. Lin has said within the NATO realm and in Europe, we're actually seeing Russia being quite cautious, notwithstanding the brutality on the ground in Ukraine. We haven't yet seen some of the things that people were worried about in terms of attacks of convoys going in to Ukraine from NATO countries. There were reports, of course, of missiles from the Black Sea going over potentially Romania and Moldova.
My question is, should we have to respond under Article 5? Assuming we had to respond under Article 5, what is the probability of having a second front open up? What would be that probability on the other side of the world?
On the other side of the world, as I think Dr. Lin has said, I think that's quite low. And I think in Europe, what we're seeing is Russia's more likely to keep on trying with cyber, political and economic intrusions than more military expansion because of Russia's own concerns about having to respond to too many fronts at the same time.
Thank you.
If I could add really quickly, I meant to say it's low now, but that would be increasing over time.
As we get closer to perhaps a 2027 time frame.
But also as U.S.-China competition intensifies, as China will be thinking, well, what are the best ways, if we need to use force, they will be thinking, if the United States is distracted, it is a better opportunity for us to use force.
Thank you.
Senator Rounds, I'm a little less sanguine than my colleagues here. This scenario that you've raised, the simultaneity problem, is one that our defense strategy struggles with. As you know, we shifted away from building a force that could deal with two major regional contingencies. And what that did, as you know, raised the salience of nuclear weapons, a dangerous scenario. But that's what our approach is. If we're in one fight, the way we're going to hold off the other fight, for the most part, is rely on allies and rely on our nuclear deterrent. That's a place we don't want to be. So winning in Ukraine is key here because it pins down Vladimir Putin, weakens his military, and reduces the likelihood we face the simultaneity problem which you've raised here. But I am not sanguine. I think what we saw at the Winter Olympics and this China-Russia axis presents the very problem that you're thinking about.
Following up on that, should we find ourselves in that type of a position and we would be required to, I've always said that look, nobody wants to use nuclear weapons, but the best way not to have to use nuclear weapons is to be just overwhelming in our capabilities. We're currently in the middle of upgrading our NC3. What would be, Dr. Zakheim, what would be your opinion as to our process in the upgrading, and what should we be working on or focused on right now with regard to our nuclear capabilities on the triad?
Well, I think this committee has done a great job of modernizing the triad. Of course, it's not happening fast enough, and you know that. The committee gets the briefings on it. I thought the nuclear posture review was good. It certainly didn't change the doctrine, but we're still stuck at the strategic level. And as you know, Senator, the Chinese and the Russians are modernizing, not only at the strategic level, but also kind of at theater level, intermediate level, tactical weapons, and we're behind there. And I think what that does is introduce a possibility and leads to a form of escalation that none of us would ever want.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm up against my time limit.
Thank you very much.